Today I'm happy to be sharing with you a very interesting article in my field, which is diabetes versus physical exercise by the authors Richinska, Zoic and Elinsky. It was published in 2011 by Joseph Pilsudski University of Physical Education in Warsaw in Poland. And this article has 7 pages. The overall main idea of this article is that physical exercise is one of the important and useful treatments for diabetes and through controlling the blood glucose. Before I start to summarize this article, I want to give you the definition of diabetes to understand the process. Diabetes means your blood glucose or your blood sugar is too high, and this is actually good for our bodies to get energy, but having too much sugar in our blood can hurt us. So there is a hormone which called insulin that is produced by pancreatic beta cells. Reduce this increase of blood glucose to resist it and to transport it into another different cells. So the meaning here, when we have diabetes, that means our bodies fail to produce enough insulin to resist the increase of blood glucose. So the summary of this article, at the beginning, the authors show briefly introduction about diabetes through explaining its prevalence and the two types of diabetes and its complications. And they also talk about some processes that have a role in the regulation of the blood glucose. First, they talk about the impacts of blood glucose on the levels. The impacts of blood glucose levels on the regulation of insulin production. When it means when the concentration of blood glucose on beta cells is too high, the insulin, as I said in the definition, the insulin will increase to resist it and to transport it to another cells in the body. Second, they talk about the carbohydrates metabolism. Also has a role in the regulation of blood glucose levels. Metabolism means that chemical reaction that happen in the living organisms. It means the chemical reaction that happened in our bodies, in human bodies or animals or plants. For example, our bodies gets sugar from the digestion of food in order to get energy. So this process is one of the metabolism, and it has a role to regulate the blood glucose. Not just in the blood, also to transport it to another cells in the body. The third process they mention that there are some hormones that involved in the metabolisms and to regulate the blood glucose. Besides the insulin, there is also hormone glucagon, and this hormone actually has a different role compared with insulin. Insulin is reduced when the blood glucose is increased, but glucagon is reduced when the blood glucose is decreased. And so the main idea of this previous process is that physical enhance their activities. After that, the authors talk about the importance of doing exercise for diabetics patients. It helps them to get rid of the excess sugar and in our blood, and also to lose the excess weight, since the main cause of the diabetes is obesity. Also, they talk about the types of appropriate exercise that mustn't be cause injury, and they talk about the appropriate intensity and duration of doing exercise for diabetics patient. Finally, the author suggests some advice that should be considered to avoid possible consequences during and after physical exercise. And they also talk about something that should be controlled and observed during the exercise, like the blood glucose levels and the maximum heart rate and the maximum oxygen and the blood pressure. This is the summary of this article. I chose this article because it is very interesting and useful for to educate the diabetics patient, and it can help them to understand the relationship between diabetes and physical exercise. It covers enough information for the patient as a guide to know the appropriate types of exercise, the appropriate intensity, and the appropriate also duration. And actually, the most important thing that I found interesting and actually surprised me in this article was in the last part. Actually, is the main point for doing exercise for the diabetics patient is to reduce the blood glucose. But actually, the reducing of blood glucose can lead to some negative consequences. Even though in the healthy people, it's always the blood glucose will decrease. And for example, it may happen venting. So patient must be aware about doing exercise, must balance the sport, and must balance the sport, and the most important thing, they must eat enough carbohydrates to repetition the excess glucose. And